Hi, everyone. I'm just going to be on camera just for a few minutes here. I just wanted to welcome you all to the first ever ACAW virtual CE event. And we hope you enjoy what we have to present for you today. So I'm going to go ahead and take myself off camera. And we'll go ahead and get started. So that's my picture there on the screen. During this presentation, we will be discussing how to become ACAW board certified and then exploring the careers of several ACAW diplomates. So I'm Dr. Stacy Pritt, as Dane mentioned, and I'm the current president of ACAW. I became board certified in 2013, and I currently work at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center as the Assistant Vice President for Conflict of Interest and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or ACAW. I also serve as the Export Control Officer and oversee stem cell research oversight. Before we get started, I also wanted to acknowledge Mr. Dane Johnston, who you just heard. He is Director of Continuing Education for the North Carolina State University College of Veterinary Medicine. Without him, this webinar and the CE credit that you will earn would not have been possible. So we have 4 learning objectives for you today. So the first is for you to understand the process of becoming board certified in animal welfare, for you to learn how to identify an ACAW mentor, for you to learn how to contribute to the field of animal welfare, specifically through publications, and for you to be able to identify some of the career opportunities available for veterinarians in animal welfare. So you saw this flashing on the screen before we got started, but just briefly on our agenda, we have 4 ACAW diplomats that will be speaking today. I'm going to go first right after this little introduction. I'm going to talk about ACAW's history and the certification routes. Then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lavon Meunier, who is the ACAW Training Committee Chair and a Charter ACAW Diplomate. And she will be reviewing how you can establish a personal training program as part of the certification process. I will come back and I will briefly talk about our credentialing process. I had previously served as the Credentialing Committee Chair. Then we have Dr. Randy Young, who is the chair of our exam committee, and he's going to be talking to you about the ACAW board certification exam. And then at the end, all of us, in addition to Dr. Chelsea Shively with the USDA, who is a more recent ACAW diplomate, will be talking to you about career opportunities. So for the ACAW history, let me get my notes here. ACAW actually started as an organizing committee back in 2007. Key to ACAW's formation was ensuring that the entire veterinary profession would be involved. A very wide net was cast to ensure that veterinarians were identified from a variety of practice areas, both species and practice type, so that they could be involved in the organizing committee. And so assistance was sought from other ABVS recognized veterinary specialty organizations, as well as allied veterinary associations. And the organizations listed here on the slide are those that had recommended members to participate and serve on the ACAW organizing committee. There were a few other key individuals who had exemplary track records in working within the field of animal welfare, but who were not associated with any organization, who also joined the organizing committee. There were approximately 30 veterinarians involved with the organizing committee. So the OC met in 2007, and there were some additional meetings held of the organizing committee. But then ACAW actually became incorporated as a 501c6 not-for-profit organization headquartered in Illinois in 2010. And so with that, actually, the organizing committee disbanded and then restarted meeting as ACAW. So the group that provides official recognition for veterinary specialty organizations is the American Board of Veterinary Specialties, or ABVS. ACAW was granted provisional recognition by ABVS on August 1, 2012. So ACAW hosted its first examination in 2013 at the North Carolina State University College of Veterinary Medicine. That year, the exam was given to 3 candidates, and I was one of them. This year, along with several other specialty veterinary organizations, we actually offered our first remote examination to a few candidates. And currently, we have 61 active ACAW Diplomates, and this actually includes most of the members of that first organizing committee, who are now referred to as Charter Diplomates. So no discussion about ACAW is complete without mentioning some of our distinguished presidents and our founder. So our founder is Dr. Bonnie Beaver. For those of you who may not be familiar with her, she is a professor at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Texas A&M. She is a former AVMA president. She founded the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists and was awarded the AVMA award this year. So Bonnie founded ACAW, and she served as our first president. Following Dr. Bonnie Beaver, we had Dr. Gail Golab. Gail is the Chief Veterinary Officer at the AVMA, and she has the distinction of being the first American member to gain animal welfare certification through the Australian College of Veterinary Scientists Animal Welfare Chapter. At that time, and that was in 2008, Australia was the only country that offered an animal welfare certification for veterinarians. So that is quite an accomplishment. And then our immediate past president is Dr. Jeff Boehm, and he is the Chief Executive Officer of the Marine Mammal Center that has locations in California and Hawaii. All 3 of our past presidents served on the organizing committee and our charter diplomates. So getting back to that 61 active diplomates, when you look at the practice type of our current active diplomates, the practice type with the highest number of diplomates is laboratory animal welfare. However, that is followed closely by our colleagues in companion animal welfare, kind of large animal welfare, that food, fiber, and equine, as well as other. Approximately 44% of ACAW diplomates actually work in academia. This is followed by the other group. Now, most of the people in the other group actually work for not-for-profit organizations. And then I would also say that there's a few consultants and retirees in that group. They are active ACAW diplomates, but they might have retired. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the routes to board certification. So with this slide, I'm introducing kind of the certification roadmap for ACAW, and you'll be seeing this slide again in the exam portion of this session. So very simply put, veterinarians interested in ACAW certification must first start with what is called the alternate route training program. And Dr. Meunier, in the next portion of this presentation, will go into detail of this program. Then, once the veterinarian has completed their training program, then they go through the credentialing process, which I will discuss. After credentialing, successful credentialing, the person takes the exam, and then they're a diplomate. Now, I did want to provide some information about 2 other routes of certification, just to kind of make sure we have a complete picture here. The first was this provisional route of board certification that was actually officially discontinued on November 2nd, 2017. So this was a temporary route of certification which was allowed only for within the first 5 years of ACAW's provisional recognition by ABVS. So that started August 1, 2012, and we went to November 2nd, 2017, and there's a reason for that November 2nd we'll get to in a minute. This route permitted individuals with a substantial amount of animal welfare experience that was accumulated prior to August 1, 2012 to go through credentialing, as well as take the exam, but not have to complete a personalized training program. Dr. Young and I became diplomates through this process. The other route is completing an animal welfare residency that would be approved by ACAW. Currently, we have no active residents at this time. However, we do have 3 colleges of veterinary medicine in the United States, all actively working on funded animal welfare residencies. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm hoping that we have 1 or more animal welfare residencies recognized by ACAW come online next year. So with all of that being said, and for purposes of this webinar, when we refer to a training program, we are talking about the alternate route where you create your personalized training program that you will develop with a mentor. We're going to be giving you more information about that. I did want to mention that we have a lot of information available on our website. So that's the website address, www.acaw.org. One of the first areas that you're going to want to go to is the tab called Becoming a Diplomate, and a variety of materials are there. In that tab, we give a lot of details about the alternate route, including a discussion about how it is currently the only pathway for ACAW certification, how you must find an ACAW diplomate to be your mentor. That is mandatory at this time. How you will want to register with ACAW. And so registering with ACAW, you're voluntarily giving your information to us. Now, ACAW does regularly communicate with veterinarians who have registered with us who are pursuing their alternate route training program. So this is an important step, so we know who you are and so we can communicate with you. And then there's information about submitting a proposed alternate route training program, gaining training program acceptance, completing it, then submitting the credentialing materials, and taking the exam. So where that is in the Becoming a Diplomate tab is under the Applicants packet, which that's right there. And so these are all things that you would download once you're on the website. And you'll find, like I said, a lot of documents and a lot of information about getting your training program up and going and going from there. We also have information and the ability to find a mentor on our website. So on the website, you would go to the Diplomates and Mentors tab, and then you have a search function where you can search for diplomates who have said that they will be willing to serve as mentors. Right now, we have a little less than 30, so a little less than half of ACAW diplomates who have made their information public so people can find them and ask them to be mentors. And so this is an example of what the search would yield. This information is public, so that's why I'm sharing it here. And these are just some of the diplomates who have made their information available for people who are seeking mentors. So this is my last slide in my session, and I just wanted to give a couple notes about the exam. So the first is once a person goes through their training route, completes it, gets successfully credentialed, and they're good to go to take the exam, they have to pass the exam within 5 years of that initial credentialing event. And so then the number 3 becomes significant because you actually get a maximum of 3 attempts within those 5 years to successfully complete the exam. And if the exam is not successfully completed, then you would go through the credentialing process again. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Meunier so she can talk about the alternate route training program. Give me just a couple seconds while I switch PowerPoints. And Levon, you should be ready to go.
Stacy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right, thanks a lot. We appreciate the opportunity to provide information on training programs. As Stacy mentioned, I'm the chair of the ACAW Training Committee, and it's been my pleasure to work with everybody. ACAW is a great group of people, and when you become boarded, you just become a family. So next slide. As Stacy mentioned, there are 2 routes currently, although the alternate route is the only one active. There is one approved training program, but it is not currently funded, and we are crossing our fingers that in the near future we're going to get some funded programs. The alternative route, I'm going to be presenting information on a regular training program as well as the alternate route, because there's a lot of detail that's provided in the training program that people going for the alternate route should know. And really the alternate route should be equivalent to a training program. You need to find a mentor, and Stacy's gone through that, and both the mentor and mentee will develop their training program. Next slide, please. Hello? Okay. The traditional training program should include knowledge and experiences in a variety of welfare topics, and include graduate level courses, mentor-led discussions, off-campus experiences, public speaking and debate experiences. Next slide. It's expected that a traditional residency program would take about 2 years to complete, but could be longer if a resident is pursuing a master's or PhD degree. Training should focus on the role delineation document that provides a breadth of current and ongoing welfare issues. Next slide. Okay, this is what is included in the role delineation document, and has what we call task knowledge areas, or TK areas, that includes animal welfare concepts, ethics, regulations, and contemporary animal welfare issues. The RDD is included in the application packet on the ACAW website. Next slide. And in the section on contemporary animal welfare issues, it also includes 12 species-specific topics, which includes companion animals, poultry, hoofstock, equids, lab animals, zoo animals, aquatic animals, aquaculture and fisheries, wildlife and exotic animals, animals in entertainment and exhibition, animals in education, and working and assistant animals. Next slide. The trainee is expected to do at least 8 performance assessments from different species areas using standardized animal welfare methods. Next slide. And residents are also expected to document at least 6 case studies from contemporary animal welfare issues of different species-specific topics, and 1 case study from an overarching topic. Case studies identify a welfare situation, determine how to assess the welfare of the animal or animals, and include a written report of the assessment, including steps on how welfare can be improved. Next slide. So that's an overview of the training, but that's something that in the alternate route you should be doing as well. So as Stacy mentioned, you need to find an ACAW Diplomate mentor, and this is very important, and you should make sure that the mentor that you choose is aligned with you and is committed, that both of you are committed to this long journey of learnings. You need to register and pay the registration fee. submit the proposed plan for approval within 18 months of registration and no later than January 1st of the year, credentialing will be submitted. You also need to complete the accepted training program plan within 5 years of it being accepted. Next slide. The alternate route requires an applicant to provide information on their education, a mentor letter to confirm that they have an ACAW diplomate committed to mentoring them, a timeline for completing their plan, areas of research interest, and publications. They also need to include a plan for completing the animal welfare assessments, case studies, and how they will gain knowledge and experience in the task knowledge areas listed in the RDD by completing the activities log that follows the role delineation document. Next slide. You should have a significant number of completed or planned learnings listed on the activities log form when you submit your plan, and we would expect that that would be about 70%. Trainees should gain knowledge and experiences from a variety of resources and be mindful that the time listed should not be overused. I want to mention too that attaining an animal welfare certificate is worthwhile, but completing a certification course is not considered a comprehensive training program. Next slide. When you submit your proposed plan, you should include any previous animal welfare experiences after obtaining your veterinary degree, as well as knowledge gained while achieving diplomate status in another veterinary specialty, dual residency program, or relevant doctoral program. You should also include case studies completed or planned. Next slide. This is an example of how to complete the activities log here. The training committee expects you submit this form and include enough detail so that the committee can determine that you have met requirements for a specific task knowledge area. The materials you submit in the alternate route proposal plan should clearly spell out what you have already done so you get credit, and what remains to be done and how you intend to do that. We suggest you highlight what's been completed and yet to be completed in a different color, and for instance here in red, something that has not been completed yet. And also, for example, if you attend like a 3-hour seminar, it can be applied to different TK areas, but should not be listed as 3 hours in multiple TK areas. I would break it down into 1 hour here, half hour there, and a different thing. And we want you to have a breadth and depth of experience with using different resources. Next slide. Stacy's also talked a little bit about finding a mentor, and they can be found on the website under Contact Us. Make sure that you use the most current applicants packet on the website. We also have a mentoring guideline that should be helpful in guiding both the mentor and mentee through the alternate route training journey. The guideline is under the document tab on the website. And last slide, I believe. So in summary, training to become an ACAW diplomat is expected to provide a comprehensive learning experience about animal welfare and a variety of species and issues. Candidates should gain knowledge through both didactic and experiential learnings. Candidates should expect to complete a rigorous training program and gain experience that qualifies them to sit for the certification exam. So that's the end. Thank you.
Okay, so I will talk now about the next step in that roadmap that I showed, which is credentialing. Credentialing occurs when the person has completed their training program and they've completed or have plans to complete in a very short time span their publications. And I'm going to get to publications in just a second. And they're ready to sit for the exam for the following year. I'll repeat this at the end of the session, of my session here, but the credentialing deadline each year for when you need to submit your credentialing application is November 1. So a person submits their application on November 1 so that they can take the exam the following summer. So the purpose of credentialing is to ensure that all the training program requirements have been met, to ensure that publication requirements have been met, to ensure that the applicant has met all of the requirements to take the ACAW certification exam and meets the knowledge requirements as outlined in that role delineation document, or RDD. It's also known as a job task analysis that Levon had just mentioned. It's also important to note that the credentialing committee may, and oftentimes will, ask questions during the credentialing process, because we really want to make sure that we have the full picture of what the applicant has done so that the committee can make the best decision with regards to whether or not they can be credentialed to take the examination. We haven't talked much about publication requirements. Levon briefly mentioned it in her presentation. So ACAW does have publication requirements in order to become credentialed to sit for the exam. Simply put, the requirement is that the candidate be the first author of 2 peer-reviewed manuscripts published in a periodical. It seems simple, but there's a lot of nuances to this. The manuscript itself must be peer-reviewed, even if the journal is not considered to be peer-reviewed. So what I mean by that is that there are several journals out there that the articles, the manuscripts that they published, are a mix of those that did go through the peer review process and those that did not. There's a lot of lab animal folks on the call that I can see. And for example, Lab Animal is a journal where it's a mix of some peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed articles. But the manuscripts that would be used to satisfy the ACAW publication requirements must be peer-reviewed. And to that end, if during the credentialing process, the credentialing committee has any questions as to the peer review status of the manuscripts that were submitted for consideration, the credentialing committee will ask for proof of that peer review. I'm going to give some examples of some papers that have been used by myself and others in the credentialing process, but I wanted to start by first saying what kind of papers are not accepted. As you can imagine, ACAW is looking for papers that focus on animal welfare to meet this requirement. So articles, manuscripts that are not accepted include clinical case reports. So this is different than the animal welfare case reports or case studies that Levon was discussing. Reports on basic research are also not accepted. Reports on clinical veterinary trials, not accepted. Book reviews, scientific review articles that are not focused on animal welfare, as well as book chapters. And so it's important to understand that there can be clinical case reports, scientific review articles that might have implications for animal welfare. But what the credentialing committee is really looking for is a publication that directly addresses animal welfare, not talking about something that could impact animal welfare. Now, what's also important to note about the publications is we accept publications that were published at any time post receipt of the veterinary degree. So for example, say you graduated veterinary school in 2012. you were active in some animal welfare topics, and you had a couple publications, peer-reviewed, first author in 2013, 2014. Well, then you decided to do an ACAW alternate route training program in 2018. We will accept those papers from 2013 and 2014 in this specific instance. So that means you do not have to do publications as part of your alternate route training program. So here's the first example of a publication. This happens to be mine. And what you'll notice is that this is not hypothesis-driven research. So ACAW accepts publications that demonstrate critical thinking, that are well referenced and peer-reviewed, as I previously mentioned. So we accept things other than hypothesis-driven research. Such publications can make recommendations on new policies and procedures that will impact animal welfare, offer critical analyses of situations that impact animal welfare, or examine some other animal welfare related topic through perhaps a comprehensive literature review. So in this paper, part of this paper discussed how transnational organizations oversee animal welfare and manage differing concepts of both ethics and animal welfare at sites throughout the world. And this, incidentally, came about through a paper that I wrote for an ethics course as part of my management degree. So this is another publication example from two ACAW Diplomates, Dr. Pearden and Dr. Parsons. This was published in the American Society of Animal Science. Now, this is an example of hypothesis-driven research. Actually, I would say it's animal welfare science research. So in this publication, they evaluated how the effects of sow familiarity prior to mixing them into larger groups impacts their welfare and productivity. So for those of us who are not statistics people, you know, you kind of see the p values there kind of thing. So you know that this some hypothesis-driven research. And then another example, which is kind of an interesting in between, this manuscript was written by Doctors Peter Very, Stokes, and Banks, who are ACAW diplomats, so 3 diplomates. And this one critically examined the available online animal welfare educational content based on the knowledge areas that are outlined in ACAW's role delineation document that Levon talked about. And this one was published in Lab Animal, again, an example of a journal that has some peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed manuscripts, and in which case we would ask for proof of peer review. I happen to know that this one was peer-reviewed. But it's kind of an interesting, because it's not hypothesis-driven research, but it does provide kind of this critical analytical type analyses. Currently, ACAW is working on establishing a process whereby manuscripts can be sent to the credentialing committee prior to the credentialing process so that they can be reviewed and approved. This pre-approval process will alleviate concerns that might arise as people go through either their alternate route training program or even the credentialing process, that they'll get so far and then they'll find out that their publications are not accepted. And then that could delay when they could take and when they could be credentialed to take the exam. So as I mentioned, there are some credentialing timelines here. These timelines do not change from year to year. So each year the credentialing packet is due November 1, so the committee can review it and then credential the candidate to take the exam the following summer. The credentialing committee decisions are issued a minimum of 120 days prior to the exam date. For the past few years, our exam has been offered in mid to early June. So this means that individuals are usually notified in early February. Now, with publications, we realize that some people might be working on publications up until the time of credentialing. So we do have an allowance whereby people might tell us that they're planning to submit a publication or that it's already been submitted for acceptance in a periodical under the peer review process. And we will give those individuals up until April 1, assuming that the credentialing committee has approved the content of the publication. We will give them up till April 1 to demonstrate acceptance and peer review of that publication. So a little bit of a leeway there. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Young, who will talk about the exam. And you can share your screen.
All right. Hi, everybody. Give me a minute to share my screen here. Does that look right?
It does.
Wonderful. My name is Randy Youngie. I am the Vice President of Animal Health at the Columbus Zoo and the current chair of the ACAW exam committee. Our goal today is to demystify the exam. Obviously, from this seminar and some of the questions popping up on the chat, there's lots about this that is that you need to sort through and understand. Some of it is not as clear, and I think this seminar has done a great job of clarifying it. So my goal in the next 15 minutes is to take away all the mystery of the exam, so when you get to this section, it all seems easy. You've seen this before. We're working our way through this circle. You heard about the training and the credentialing. Those are major hurdles that create a fair degree of stress and distress. But once you get past them, the only thing left is this little trivial little exam. That's what we're going to talk about now. I'm going to give you a blueprint, so detailed discussion on how this exam is structured, along with logistics, so a detailed example of how the exam is held, and hopefully, and then we'll end up with a few tips and pointers for past examinees and exam committee people. The exam is 2 sections. It is a 4-hour, 200-question multiple choice exam, and it is a 4-hour, 4-scenario part of the exam. We'll call them part 1 and part 2. In more detail, part 1, the multiple choice exam. This is consistent year to year. It is 200 multiple choice questions covering all those task areas. So the task areas you look at in your credentialing or in your training program, the exam is generated to cover all those areas to varying levels depending on the importance of those areas. Questions are written by diplomates. They are referenced to appropriate literature. They are proofread by other diplomates, and they are given an ACAW score, which is a measure of difficulty, which we'll discuss in a minute. All the exam questions are standard structure. There's a stemmer question and then 5 choices. 1 is correct and 4 are foils. No exam questions are written to be trick questions. In fact, a great deal of effort we go out of our way to make sure that they are not. For instance, there are no negative questions, no which is true except, or which of the following is false. Our goal is to make the question being asked as clear as possible so that all you have to worry about is the answer, not the question. There aren't any clues in the stems. Don't look for a or and or is or are. Don't try to game the question. They're written in a way that the question is simple and straightforward. Well, maybe not simple, straightforward, and you should only need to concern yourself with the answer. In the multiple choice exam, you have 4 hours to complete 200 questions. You may do them in any order that you like and spend as much time as you like on any question. Just remember to pace yourself. You may work through a section of the exam. You may skip over parts. You may flag questions to come back to. The entire 4 hours to use as you see fit. I mentioned ACAW scoring, and this may be familiar to some of you. ACAW scoring is a method to quantify and to correct for differing levels of difficulty. So we've all had exams we thought were harder or easier than others. For ACAW scoring, a panel of diplomates, 5 diplomates, has reviewed every question in the multiple choice database and given it a score on the difficulty, answering the question, what % of reasonably qualified applicants should get this correct? For instance, if the question says how many freedoms are included in the 5 freedoms, we would anticipate that everyone taking the exam would get that question correct. If the question was, what is Thomas Aquinas' favorite color? We would anticipate 20%. So 20% is the lowest ANGOF score you can get. That's a random guess. You have 5 answers. If you have no clue and guess randomly, you have a 20% chance of getting it right. In my experience, most of the ANGOF scores run between 60 and 80. They're in that ballpark, some a little higher, some a little lower. So once the exam is generated, the average of the ANGOF score of the questions will be the passing score for the exam. It varies a little bit. It's usually in the 70 to 75% range, but it changes each year because some of the questions are rotated out and substituted each year. It also isn't determined conclusively until after the exam, and we'll discuss that when we get to the grading part of the exam. Part 2 is the scenario part, and it is consistently structured this way. The candidates have 4 scenarios to evaluate. 2 are compare and contrast, and 2 are single species. A compare and contrast scenario might give you situations of unicorns used as lab animals or free-ranging unicorn herds and ask you to do some compare and contrast between the 2 groups. A single species type scenario question might ask you to evaluate Sasquatch racing and the welfare implications of that. Obviously, hopefully it's clear that those are made up scenarios, but it gives you the idea. All 4 scenarios are equally scored. They are all worth 100 points each. Scenarios, the answering to the scenarios may have a little bit of variability, but it's more or less similar to this. There are usually 4 questions, and each question may have varying point values. So you may have 4 25-point questions, you may have 2 40 and 2 what's left, 2 10. So when you're answering the questions, look at the value. If they're all answered equally, divide your time appropriately. If one is half the points, you might want to spend a little more time on those. These questions are usually something related to list certain aspects, compare certain aspects, correct certain aspects, again, varying with the scenario, whether it's a single species or a compare and contrast, and what the animals or the welfare situation in the situation is. This is a computerized exam, so you're typing into computer, no handwriting. So handwriting is an issue. Spelling and grammar aren't scored, but we have to be able to understand what the answer says. If you scribble an incomprehensible word and we can't calculate what it is from the sentence, it will not be considered correct. The candidates are given the scenario topics weeks before the exam. So once credentialing is concluded, who's taking the exam, and again, that's not a set time for this, but usually March, the candidates will be given the scenario topics similar to what was on the previous slide. So you'll be notified that your exam will include a single species scenario question on Sasquatch racing. And that gives you an opportunity to focus your study and to build your arguments and determine the most significant factors in that welfare situation. It's an important difference between part 2 and part 1. Once you close a scenario, you cannot reopen it. So you have 4 scenarios. When you've reached the point in a scenario that you're happy or you're completed your answering and close that, you cannot go back. So again, you divide your time and your effort appropriately to your satisfaction, but once you close a scenario, you can't open it and add more to it. The scenario pass score is set at 70%. There's no variation year to year in that scenario. This next point I've capitalized because it is important and it has been misunderstood. You must pass all 4 scenarios independently. There is not a cumulative score. It's basically 4 separate mini exams that contribute to your part 2 score. For instance, if you get 100% on the first 3 scenarios and a 60% on the 4th scenario, you will not pass the scenario section. They must all be passed by a score of 70% or more. That's the blueprint. Here's sort of how the logistics work, and it varies a bit from year to year. Before this year, the exam has been held in person. It has been hosted by NCSU College of Veterinary Medicine, but that likely would change if we continue to do in-person exams. And it historically been a Saturday in June, as Dr. Pritt indicated. So that just gives you sort of a historical perspective. The way we have conducted the exam when it's in person is to meet Friday evening for an orientation. That gives everyone a chance to see the exam room, to meet the proctors, to meet each other, to see how the computer hookup works, to understand restrooms and lunches and all those nitty-gritty details that need to be worked out before the exam. Exam starts Saturday morning for 4-hour exam for the scenarios, lunch provided, and 4-hour multiple choice exam in the afternoon. This year, because coronavirus changed the world, we held the exam as a virtual exam, which brought a fair amount of consternation to the exam committee, but seemed to work quite well. It was still, everyone took the exam on the same date. It was set, the date and time was set. It was just held at multiple locations wherever the candidates were. The exam uses a web-based software that we'll talk about next that actually makes it quite simple to work the exam logistically. Each examinee is responsible for identifying a local proctor, so someone who would monitor and supervise the exam for that examinee. The proctor was approved by the exam committee. Instructions for the exam were sent out to the candidates and proctors ahead of time. Then a week ahead, a Zoom meeting to walk through the exam as we would do in the Friday night seminar. And then during the exam chair and co-chair and the IT specialist were available in real time to manage any questions or computer logistical issues, and there were none. ExamSoft is the program that we use, and some of you may be familiar with it. I wasn't, but learned it quickly. This is a web-based exam software used by many universities. Dr. Rob Malinowski at Michigan State University has hosted this exam for a number of years for us and for other specialty colleges. And the examware software works very well for this sort of exam, and it actually makes the exam administration and completion, shall I say effortless? The exam part anyway. The exam is taken on the candidate's personal laptop. Once the software is loaded and the program is initiated, the software locks your computer so you have no access to anything on your computer or to any other web-based programs. It's basically locked into the ExamSoft exam that you're taking for the amount of the period of time that is designated for that exam. Once you conclude that period of time, the program locks the exam and closes out, or you could end earlier if you finish ahead of time. You can certainly end the program. There's a practice session beforehand on some sample questions to get the candidates familiar with the software. And again, Rob is available throughout the entire process to help with any glitches that occur. All right. Now you're done waiting for your grade. This is the last step. Multiple choice exam is computer graded. Because it's web-based and computer graded, those scores are generated relatively quickly, but it doesn't end there. All the questions that are answered incorrectly are reviewed looking for specific patterns. For instance, if everybody missed the same question with the same wrong answer, odds are it's a bad question. There's something that's misleading in that question. If multiple people missed an exam question but guessed multiple wrong answers, it's just a difficult question. So we look through the exam and the questions and look for any patterns that may require the exam committee to review that in further detail. If it is concluded by the exam committee that a question is bad or wrong or poorly written, it may be excluded from the exam at that time, and that's what changes the ANGOLF score. So if we have a question with a 90 ANGOLF score that we decide, hey, this one really isn't a fair question, we take it out, that's going to change the composite ANGOLF score at the time of the exam. So the passing score is not determined until after the exam is completed and the exam committee has reviewed all of the examinations. The scenarios, as I said, have a 70% pass rate for all 4 scenarios, must pass all 4. Grading rubrics have been generated for each of these scenarios where the expert who wrote the question is indicating what content is required as well as points for presentation. Are you making a logical and cogent argument for the stand that you're taking on the scenarios? Important to note that you can pass either part independently. They're independently graded, so you pass part 1 or 2. You merely have to retake the part that you did not pass in subsequent years. A few final points. All scoring is blind. Candidates are giving a number. The exam committee does not know which candidate correlates to which exam. All scores close to cutoff are evaluated. So if the pass score for the multiple choice exam is 72 and you have a 71.3, we're going to look at your exam and see if there's any discrepancies that might affect your grade, and make sure that the scoring is fair. Once completed, the committee submits the scores to the executive board, again blinded, along with the pass score and the recommendations. The exam master provides the key correlating the numbers to the candidates for the executive board to determine, and they make the final determination. Candidates must be notified or will be notified within 45 days of completion of the exam. And in some cases, additional information may be provided to the candidates who are not successful. For instance, if a candidate missed every question related to equine welfare, the committee would likely suggest to them that that might be an area to focus on for subsequent exams. Few final hints in closing, areas where people have stumbled in the past. Just like any other examination, pace yourself. You have 4 hours. In the multiple choice, you can go back and forth as much as you want, but the scenarios, you close the scenario that it is done. So pace yourself as you see appropriate. Some folks like to take the hardest scenarios first and say the easiest for last. Some like to knock out the easy ones and focus on the harder ones. You decide what works for you. Another important consideration is to answer the question that is asked. And it's easy in an essay type question to go off on a long treatise about welfare and miss the point of the question. If it says list 4 things and you list 4, if it says list 4 good things and you list 4 bad things, your 4 bad things may be correct, but it's not answering the question. If it says list 4 bad things and how to fix them, and you list 4 bad things but not how to fix them, you will not get credit for the question. And that's been a frustrating error that candidates have made in the past. Again, remember, there's no trick questions. If you think you're reading a trick into the STEM, you're not. It's not meant to be that way. And remember, 70-ish is passing. So if you're on question number 10 and it's really giving you a hard time, don't spend half an hour on it. You don't have to get them all right. You have to get 70-ish%. Move on from difficult questions and come back to them later if you like. So that's the exam in a nutshell. Hopefully we covered the logistics necessary for your success. I believe I have the next presentation as well, so give me 1 minute to change presentations. And do we power on, Stacy?
Oh, Randy, you're good to go, except now I think I accidentally muted you, so you'll need to unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
All right, am I back?
There you go. Okay, yeah, you're good to go.
All right, let me find. I'm lost. All right, wait a minute. Oh no. I can't seem to get to. There we go. All right. I can't seem to open Zoom. Stacy, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, I didn't close out of Zoom.
No, you're good. I mean, if you want, Randy, Chelsea, if you're available to get started, either Chelsea could go or Levon and I could go. Chelsea, if you're good to go, are you able to share?
Let me give it a try here.
Oh, I think I'm back. Can we go ahead?
Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
For it.
Okay,
Sorry, everybody. All right, here we go.
you're good to go. Yay.
Thank you. Too many buttons to click. All right, does that look right?
Looks good.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. The next section is talking about careers in animal welfare, or I should say applications of animal welfare to a variety of careers. And we're going to start with zoological medicine. And I qualified that a bit because animal welfare certainly has a significant place in zoological medicine, but becoming boarded in animal welfare or being a diplomate in animal welfare is probably not the most direct route into a career in zoo medicine, but I will explain that as we go. This is my background, how I ended up in a zoo and focused on animal welfare. I grew up in the Midwest, went to the University of Illinois and got a master's degree in ecology, anthropology, and evolution with a focus on wildlife management. Decided veterinary medicine was probably a more reliable career, so I completed my veterinary degree, did a residency, and went to the St. Louis Zoo for a number of years where I was director of animal health, during which time I became a diplomate at the American College of Zoological Medicine. 8 years ago, I moved to Columbus, Ohio as vice president of animal health for the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, and during my tenure here, I became a diplomate of the American College of Animal Welfare. And most people think about a zoo veterinarian's career, they think about what you typically would, taking care of animals in a zoo or aquarium, or taking care of free-ranging wildlife. And that certainly is a primary focus and where most of our training and energy is focused. But as I advanced in my career from clinical medicine to management, I realized more and more of my time was spent focusing on areas more related to welfare, husbandry, and those areas, and less, increasingly less on clinical medicine. Modern zoos spend a great deal of time focused on animal welfare issues, husbandry, conservation type issues, and I realized that much of my efforts were focusing on evaluating and assessing animal welfare, and felt that developing a level of expertise in animal welfare would improve my ability to do that job, and likewise would increase my credibility. And I figured if I'm training and learning about animal welfare, what better way to do it than through the American College of Animal Welfare. There are certain aspects of animal welfare that are obvious to any observer. If we look at the zoo animal settings, there are clearly areas of poor welfare, whether it's the poor nutrition in the camels, the inadequate housing in the cats, or the inadequate social group in the primate. These we can look at and clearly say these are not appropriate levels of animal welfare. The more difficult thing to assess are the more subtler areas of animal welfare, and that's where animal welfare science is an important addition to the emotional response to animal welfare. And pictures like this are what zoo distractors and adversaries use to stir emotion about animals in human care. And being trained in animal welfare allows you to give the critical evaluation of the situation and apply science to the evaluation, which not only lets you evaluate the situation, but to evaluate the improvement and to rebut the arguments that say zoos are bad, circuses are bad. It also makes you more competent at your job and allows you to provide a higher level of welfare for the animals in your zoo collection. And it goes beyond zoos, and I'll just briefly touch on a couple. Any animal entertainment activity, any activity where people are interacting with animals has the potential for having animal welfare issues. And in recent years, circuses have taken a great deal of scrutiny, and many of them have closed because the public opinion that performing animals in circuses were not an acceptable level of animal welfare. And what about things like swim with the dolphins or have your picture taken with the lion? All these sorts of scenarios raise questions about the appropriateness of the experience. Is it enriching for the animal or the person, or is it an improper level of welfare? And as a veterinarian associated with any of these projects, it becomes part of your duty to give a critical opinion. Zoos in general do a great job, I should say professional zoos do a great job of maintaining animals in naturalistic habitats under appropriate social groups and in good levels of nutrition and healthy situations where they live hopefully long and productive lives. Most zoos base their programs on 3 pillars: education, entertainment, and conservation, but most guests come to the zoo looking for entertainment. They want to see the animals in a natural setting and be entertained by what they are experiencing. And although these pictures look great, we're generating an emotional response. These animals look happy, but you as a trained animal welfare professional can critically assess the situation, give a scientific evaluation of a level of welfare, and again, rebut or discuss with distractors or provide proof to people questioning animals' welfare based on your professional credentials. 2 other areas that are prominent in professional zoos are enrichment and conditioning. Enrichment is anything we do to enhance the animal's life, whether it's a puzzle, feeder, or novel stimulus of some sort. And conditioning, operant conditioning is any type of behavioral training that we do to facilitate normal veterinary and husbandry procedures. For instance, this adult male sea lion is targeting to a trainer while the ophthalmologist examines his corneas. This is a procedure that would require general anesthesia if the animal were not appropriately conditioned. So by conditioning this, we make the animal's life less stressful, we make the veterinarian's job much easier. Operant conditioning and enrichment programs are areas that veterinarians are fundamentally involved in, either in charge of or at least consulting with. And again, you can provide an informed opinion, but with animal welfare training and applying animal welfare science, you can provide a much more critical and scientifically backed opinion. One final area to add: many zoos, certainly large zoos, are involved in research and field work. Most zoos don't have the level of research assessment as a university would have, but should have some sort of animal care committee, whether it's IACUC or an equivalent, and veterinarian is a fundamental part of that, looking at animal research to evaluate whether it's appropriate for the animal's welfare and appropriate for the zoo's research mission. And in field work as well, many veterinarians in zoos get the opportunity to work in the field, often with animal species of significance to their zoo, and providing both veterinary care and animal welfare expertise makes you a very valuable member of the research team. Remember that you'll often be working with researchers at universities who have put their research projects through university IACUCs, and having a veterinarian boarded in animal welfare is a significant advantage for them, as well as when these researchers are applying for permits in range countries or applying for grant funding. To say a member of their team is a veterinarian who is boarded in the American College of Animal Welfare, I believe gives them a significant advantage in those areas when they're trying to establish themselves. So in conclusion, although welfare isn't a primary focus of most people getting into zoo medicine, it's become a major part of zoo medicine as in modern professionally run careers. It gives you a level of expertise and scientific knowledge to critically assess welfare, and it makes you even further asset for your facility and for your employer.
Okay, thank you, Randy. So we will move on to Dr. Chelsea Shively.
Thank you, Stacy. It's going to take me just a second here. Let's see. Screen. All right, is that working for everyone?
Looks good.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about regulatory and government animal welfare careers. All right, and so I just want to share a little bit about my background, not as a way to tell you how to do things, but rather as an example of one of the many varied career pathways that people that are all members of the American College of Animal Welfare have taken. I think veterinary medicine in general provides so many different doors within your career, and in animal welfare and specifically, there's just a lot of different ways that you can apply the science of animal welfare to a career opportunities. And so I'll just give a brief background. So I am also from the Midwest, originally from Michigan, and I did my bachelor's degree in zoology with a specialization in bioethics, humanities, and society at Michigan State University. And then I stayed there for my DVM degree. And I just want to pause and say that you know, sometimes it's a little strange for me to be sitting on this side of things, giving all of you information about ACAW, because it wasn't that long ago. In fact, it was November 2010 when I was a veterinary student. I was at Michigan State, and they jointly hosted the Swimming with the Tide conference, all about animal welfare, and that was the first time I had ever heard of ACAW. So Dr. Bonnie Beaver gave a presentation similar to this. You know, obviously it was before ACAW was fully stood up and in existence, but sharing this idea of having a professional college related to animal welfare. And that moment really shaped the trajectory of my career because I knew that you know, animal welfare was something that I was passionate about, and here was like this opportunity to create a career out of it. So I just say that, you know, to know that I've been in all of your shoes relatively recently, and, you know, there's a lot of different ways to reach that end goal if that's something that you're interested in. And so I graduated veterinary school in 2012, which was the year that ACAW was officially stood up. And so at that time, and even today, as you just heard, there were no official residency training programs. You know, most of my classmates were graduating and going into internship programs and, you know, on their way for these professional programs. And, you know, animal welfare was still this kind of ambiguous idea. And so I knew that I wanted to gain more scientific expertise in this area. And so I had the opportunity to do a PhD program with Dr. Temple Grandin at Colorado State University in animal behavior and welfare. And I know there was a question earlier asking about the alternate route. And so I can just, you know, briefly say that I was able to form an alternate route for the American College of Animal Welfare by combining it with a PhD program at Colorado State. You know, that's just one way of accomplishing that, but for me it was hugely beneficial to be at a land-grant university. CSU had a vet school. I was able to make connections with a lot of people there and do a lot of different field trips. You know, we here in Colorado, I was able to go down to Denver, to the zoo and to the aquarium. You know, I was able to work with a lot of different livestock species here and use that, all of the expertise available at Colorado State, both within the animal science department and within the veterinary college, to be able to supplement my training and create that alternative animal welfare training program for myself. If anybody has, you know, further questions about my path, I'm happy to talk more offline about that. I will just put in another plug. Dr. Pritt mentioned it in the chat, but another way that really helped me become familiar with animal welfare of a variety of different species and be comfortable with the concept of scenarios was participating in the animal welfare judging and assessment contest. So I was fortunate. I got involved with this contest during my undergraduate years at Michigan State and was able to compete at Michigan State during my veterinary school time. And then when I came out to Colorado State, I was able to convince the department chair at CSU in the animal sciences program to support having a team at CSU. So I created and coached undergrad, veterinary, and graduate teams at CSU for 4 years. So I was able to be involved with that contest for a number of years. Each year they have a different grouping of species that they cover. So it broadened my knowledge of a lot of different species, and I was able to practice you know, the oral communication skills and all the things that are necessary for being successful in an animal welfare career. So this year is a little bit unique because of the situation that we're all in. It is virtual. So for those of you who may have been limited with, you know, not being able to travel and compete in that contest historically, you know, now might be a great opportunity for you to check it out. And I will say that it's primarily geared towards students, but they do also have the opportunity for practicing veterinarians to participate each year just to get that whole experience of being involved in the contest. So again, that's the Animal Welfare Judging and Assessment Contest. So after I finished my PhD, I took the ACAW exam and thankfully was successful and became board certified. And then I moved to Washington, D.C. because I really wanted to have a better understanding of how policies related to animal use were developed. And so I participated in the AVMA AAAS Congressional Science Fellowship. And then once that completed, I moved back to Fort Collins, where I am now, with the USDA as a veterinary medical officer and epidemiologist. And so I want to mention the fellowship again, because, you know, when you hear about a Congressional Science Fellowship, that doesn't necessarily scream animal welfare to you. You know, and I think that's important when considering any career in animal welfare. Oftentimes the title of the job position or even the description of the job might not have the word welfare anywhere in it. And it's more about thinking, you know, how could I impact animal welfare in this role? And so the Congressional Science Fellowship Program was an opportunity for me to work on. I was on the Senate Agriculture Committee, and so I was able to work for my home state senator, that's Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, and she's the ranking member of the Senate Agriculture Committee. And so I worked for her and the committee staff And my role was a science advisor on animal health and animal welfare issues, among other things. And so I was able to work directly with a lot of the different stakeholders that I had learned about and read about as I was preparing for the ACAW exam. And, like, for example, I worked with the Humane Society of the United States quite regularly, as well as a lot of the different ag groups. And so being able to have that firsthand understanding of, where these different organizations come from and know some of the people and the players involved was really beneficial for me. And then also just to be able to have that kind of behind the scenes look at how policy is made. I know this is a turbulent time in American politics, but I'll just say that, my experience, I was there in 2016 through 2017. So, right after the 2016 election, there was a lot of transition, a lot of change going on. But I will say my experience was different than that of how politics was portrayed in the media. And specifically with agriculture, policy is more related to the commodities in the states that you're from rather than being along party lines. And so the Senate Agriculture Committee, like our committee room, if you ever have the chance to go to DC and do a tour, the Senate Ag Committee, they have a long table and they call it the dinner table, because senators come together and they really try to find solutions for American agriculture and food policy. And I'll just say that, like, we were quite successful during my time there, and that was my experience. So being able to reflect on things that you see just in the general media, I think it was really valuable to have that experience of, kind of pulling the curtain back and seeing how things are done. And, the Senate Ag Committee doesn't often end up on the nightly news, but that's because things are successful and moving forward. But being able to be there and, for example, I was working on the 2018 Farm Bill. And so the Farm Bill is about every 5 years they go through, and it's one of the biggest funding opportunities for agriculture, and that includes USDA and some of the animal welfare programs that are run at the federal level. So I'll stop blabbing about me now and talk a little bit about some of the career opportunities in regulatory and government related to animal welfare. And so I just want to start out by saying, if you don't already know this, the government is just basically acronyms everywhere. So I've tried to include the full names. And every few years, we reorganize and change the acronyms. So that's just, how the government functions. But I think when people often think about animal welfare careers within the federal government, their first thought is with animal care. So animal care is a part of the USDA, and they are responsible for enforcing the Animal Welfare Act and the Horse Protection Act. And so, that's two major pieces of legislation that, as you're preparing for the exam, you'll learn all about. But that's, a lot of people think of animal welfare careers specifically related to animal care. And I want to say that that's a great opportunity. There are a few of the diplomates in ACAW work for animal care, and, they can provide more information about their experience there. But don't limit yourself and think only about animal care, because that's the animal welfare group within USDA. There's a lot of other ways that you can find careers within animal welfare that are not specifically, an animal welfare position. So our Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, so they are involved with the Humane Slaughter Act. And so they, we often have veterinarians that are at slaughter facilities making sure that there's humane handling as these animals move through. So that's another opportunity there. So I work for veterinary services, and I'll just say, like, my job doesn't have the word welfare in the position title or description. My position is specifically related to antibiotic use in animal agriculture and antimicrobial resistance. And so, at first glance, you might be like, well, how does that relate to animal welfare? Well, for me, I think about how we address issues related to antimicrobial resistance, as well as, changing policies that might limit access to antibiotics for different populations of animals and how that could relate to animal welfare. So, for example, one of the ways that we talk about reducing antimicrobial resistance and reducing antibiotic use is with biosecurity practices or changing management or housing practices. And so those are all related to animal welfare. And so being able to investigate those issues and think about the animal health and welfare implications of these policy changes, I think it all relates very well. And so, veterinary services has a number of career opportunities for veterinarians. My role as an epidemiologist is just one example of that. There's a number of other opportunities within the federal government. So the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH, they have an Office of Laboratory Animal Welfare. So they're looking at, they set the welfare standards and oversee research that's being funded by the NIH where animals are used. There's also the Food and Drug Administration. They have a Center for Veterinary Medicine, and so they regulate all of the drugs and products that are used in animal medicine. And so, they have a number of careers where they're the ones, I engage with them a lot on antibiotics, but they're, setting the regulatory policy for how different products are used in animals. I mentioned the United States Congress because of my experience there as a fellow, but I also have colleagues who are veterinarians who work full-time for either members of the U.S. Senate or House, and they're involved with setting those policies related to animal welfare. So legislation related to, horse storing was one example. That's why we have the Horse Protection Act, but horse slaughter and transport of horses across country lines, those are all areas that are often hot topics, and there tends to be legislation reintroduced each Congress related to many different animal welfare issues. The National Association of Federal Veterinarians, I list this one here because they're a great resource to provide information about being a federal veterinarian, as well as providing links to different job opportunities that might be available. So I'm more familiar with the federal level because that's been my experience, but I just want to point out that state departments of agriculture often have veterinarians in their offices that are involved with, sometimes with animal welfare issues. And the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, NASDA, is a great resource for finding career opportunities within the state level. As well as animal control offices are often at the local or county level. And so that's another area for veterinarians interested in animal welfare to find careers. I wanted to also mention, different animal welfare audits. So, you really can't buy food anymore without some sort of label on it or sticker or certification, and animal welfare is no exception. There's a number of different programs available out there. And so all of those different organizations and companies often hire veterinarians with special expertise in animal welfare to help with the conducting audits and certification processes to make sure that the labels are matching the practices on farms. And so here's a few examples of those, but there's a number of different companies and groups out there. And this is a continually evolving space. Sometimes people involved with one organization might not like the direction that it's going, and then they spin off and create a new label. So there's a lot of options and opportunities within this space for careers. And so I just want to end, since I graduated relatively recently, and, as someone with a DVM, a PhD, I'm boarded in ACAW, sometimes it can be a little challenging or overwhelming to figure out, what kind of jobs can I find and where do I find these jobs? They're not advertised quite as widely. They tend to be a little bit more specialized. And so I wanted to just give some examples of resources that I have routinely checked just to find career opportunities for myself as well as for some of my friends and colleagues in this space. So if you're interested in federal careers, USA Jobs is the #1 resource for that. And I just want to say, if you are applying for jobs with USA Jobs, make sure you look out for some of the resources available that talk about how to do that application process. It's a little bit different than some of the the application processes for other careers. So that's the place to go for federal jobs. The AVMA Veterinary Career Center is a great place. You can keyword search for welfare, and that'll often pull up a number of different career options. If you are interested in the ag animal side of things, the Federation of Animal Science Societies posts jobs about academic positions within animal science, as well as the American Society of Animal Science. So there are two websites there that provide academic jobs related to animal science, and often animal welfare positions at universities are housed in the animal sciences departments. The International Society for Applied Ethology is a great place. They often have a lot of international opportunities, so that's a good place. They have on their employment opportunities page on their website, they have both full-time careers as well as postdoc and PhD and intern programs. So that's a good place to check for opportunities. The United States Animal Health Association, or USAHA, they have on their bulletin board, they post a lot of regulatory positions. So this is often veterinarians in the federal government as well as state government, and organizations are posted on that website. So that's a bunch of websites you can check out, but also, you know, if there's a particular organization or company or university you're interested in, you know, make sure that you're checking on those websites as well. And all those animal welfare assurance programs that I talked about, you know, oftentimes you have to go directly to their website to be able to find career opportunities. And then I will say that I have had some success with LinkedIn, just searching for animal welfare careers. You can sign up for notifications that will send you email alerts when different positions meeting your specifications show up, as well as websites such as Indeed or Glassdoor. So again, it's a somewhat specialized career, but you can set the parameters in some of those search engines to be able to help you find the right opportunity for you. And I know I just gave you a lot of information, so I've provided my email information here. I really encourage you, if you have questions for me, to please reach out. I wouldn't be where I am today without the help of a lot of other people, and I feel that it's my duty to continue to pay it forward to others that are interested in this space. You know, it's relatively new, and it's an exciting time to be involved with ACAW, as well as careers in animal welfare. And so I just encourage you, if you have further questions, to please reach out. And I will turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, which will get us started for Lavon's discussion about laboratory animal medicine.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to talk about careers in my experience in lab animal medicine. So next slide. And my journey to where I am today. Currently, I'm the Director of Veterinary Medicine and attending veterinarian at GlaxoSmithKline Pharmaceuticals. Before that, I've been with Glaxo for almost 36 years, but I spent 8 years in small animal practice before going into lab animal medicine. And I will have to say, if you told me when I graduated that this was the journey I was going to take, I would have thought you were crazy. But you never say never, as I've learned. I received my DVM from the University of Minnesota. I became board certified through the alternate route in lab animal medicine over 20 years ago. I'm a charter member of ACAW, and as you know, the training committee chair. I've also been, I'm past president of the Association of Primate Veterinarians and past chair of their animal welfare committee. I've also have the privilege of being a member of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee on the Dog Aging Project. So my experience in animal welfare, and I think we've all going through clinical practice and knowing some of the issues that we've had there. And when I got into the field of lab animal medicine, the Animal Welfare Act had just been amended to include psychological well-being of non-human primates and exercise for dogs. So I had the opportunity to help develop those programs, and I always never really knowing that I had an interest in behavior, but I always felt that. And so I was really happy when there was a behavior college. But I thought when I was going to go through lab animal that I was going to walk through this door and get narrower and narrower. And as I found out, when you go through that, it opens another door into a whole array of things. I got into enrichment and monkeys and dog exercise. And then I had the opportunity to meet Bonnie Beaver when I was co-chair of a SLAP seminar on minimizing stress in lab animals, and she had mentioned about forming this committee to have a College of Animal Welfare, and I raised my hand and said I'd be very interested. So this has just been a great journey, and I've had so many opportunities over the years to learn about animal welfare and make improvements in the lab animal arena. So next slide. As attending veterinarian at Glaxo, I oversee their animal care and use program, and I'm a member of the ACAW. We have been dealing with animal welfare issues from day one since I've worked there. And animal welfare, I think, not only in all aspects, but especially in large academic institutions, including the large pharmaceutical company I work for and contract research labs, really want to ensure their stakeholders and the public that animal welfare is an important aspect of their animal care and use committee or program. When I got into, as I mentioned, lab animal, we developed enrichment programs. I did a research project on presenting different enrichment items to non-human primates. That was not the caging that we've developed over the years. It's been a long journey. I actually, because we are a global company, I've learned from working in a large pharmaceutical company that's global that it's really critical to understand regulations and differing cultural perspectives from different areas in the world, and how critical that is in building consensus and harmonizing animal care programs. We have currently what we're working on, a harm versus benefit project, identifying how we're going to develop policies for different species, and decided that we're going to look at it holistically. We've got people from the UK, from Italy, from Belgium. We try to pull from different regulations. Europe has a different perspective. It was interesting when I went to visit Norway several years ago. I realized that they do not allow spaying their dogs. That's not acceptable. It's an elective surgery and can only be done if there's a medical purpose for it, which I thought was really interesting. And their perspectives on just having animals in a lab animal setting for a time period, thinking about harm versus benefit. So it's been very interesting. Next slide. If you can. I think having animal expertise really helps an individual's credibility and gaining support for animal welfare related projects. Years ago, there was a project that we were looking at developing flexible housing for both non-human primates and dogs, and they didn't ask for our perspective, I think, as much as they should have, and that project ended up getting scrapped because they didn't consider the behavioral aspects of it. So I've been developing standards, not only housing standards, but exercise standards for dogs. We built some caging. We no longer have dogs, but had a lot of learnings about realizing that the dogs, when they could see, they didn't bark. And so we built our caging so that they could see. We had horizontal bars so they could see out, benches in the front, doors that we could open that would facilitate us observing them. And our non-human primate, the new renovated facility now has both larger European-sized cages as well as pens to allow for species typical behaviors and being able to climb and swing and forage. We have verandas that allow them, monkeys, to be able to sit out. We had a group come in with behaviorists and experts to provide information, and we provided information to them on what is we think is the best new housing strategy. I've been involved in a housing project for non-human primates through the Association of Primate Veterinarians, and we're actually presenting a webinar in a couple weeks on our findings from that. My background in animal welfare has also helped me facilitate ICAW discussions on welfare and certainly on humane endpoints. My facility has been really proactive in developing behavior performance standards for all our species. For instance, we looked at the Disney spider document and went through, I have a huge document for each species on what their natural behaviors are, and then what we consider our top behaviors that we would like to encourage and discourage. For instance, mice, nesting material is extremely important for them, not only as a behavior, but also for thermal regulation. Years ago, when I first got into the field of lab animal medicine, we had no enrichment in there, and sometimes we would put empty bottles, and we'd notice that all the mice would pile up together, and it was kind of interesting. And now I realize why, so that they can conserve heat. And so it's been a really interesting journey, and I think having the background of animal welfare is useful every day in lab animal. So next slide. I do want to mention, and I know we're kind of running out of time here, that I think becoming an ACAW diplomate will even have more weight as time goes on, and can be a differentiating factor in hiring someone, especially at a higher level. It also gives you more opportunity to contribute to leadership and membership on committees. There are specific animal welfare committees as part of the American Society of Lab Animal Practitioners, and we created one for the Association of Primate Veterinarians, where I was the first chair. Next slide. So these are a few positions that I found that are animal welfare specific. At our company, we have a senior officer of animal welfare in our Office of Animal Welfare, Ethics, and Strategy. There's a director of animal welfare at the University of Pennsylvania, a global head of animal welfare and compliance at Novartis, and a VP of global animal welfare at Charles River Laboratories. And these are some sites where you can find job postings. So with that, I will turn it over to Stacy.
Thank you. Give me a second to pull up my presentation. Okay, you should be seeing my presentation. Okay, I actually did not include a slide of my background, so I'll just do that very quickly. My veterinary degree came from Washington State University. I was in private practice for about 3.5 years. before I went into lab animal medicine, very much doing the clinical laboratory animal care, management of personnel, management of facilities, and I did that for several years. During that time, I also earned an MBA in healthcare management and a Master's of Science in Managerial Science. About over 10 years ago, well over 10 years ago actually, I started to move from the clinical aspects of laboratory animal medicine more into the animal research oversight, the kind of the regulatory compliance and animal welfare components. And indeed, I had one position for a while at a CRO where I was director of animal welfare. And during that time, I also became very active with the AVMA, so somewhat similar to what Dr. Shively was talking about with a few AVMA programs, including the ones that she's been involved with. I was an active member of the AVMA Legislative Advisory Committee for several years, as well as a member of the AVMA House of Delegates, and most recently I served as AVMA Vice President. And during that time, I learned a lot about animal welfare from many different species. For the past 7.5 years, I've been at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. We're an academic medical center. Originally, I was director of the ACAW, and then a couple of years ago, I took on additional responsibilities and was made to be an assistant vice president. I do have my certified professional in ACAW administration certification, and another relevant certification is certified in healthcare research compliance, which not only includes the ACAW, but other areas such as conflict of interest, human research oversight, and a few other areas. So somewhat similar but different than what Levon was talking about with regards to lab animal medicine. I'm going to focus on kind of careers in animal research oversight and how that intersects with animal welfare. So with animal research oversight, this usually means working with an ACAW. And for similar to what Randy was saying, ACAWs are actually found in a variety of institutions. For the most part, if an institution is doing any type of vertebrate animal research, they're going to have an ACAW. So that means ACAWs can be found at just about any academic institution, as well as human hospitals. Many human hospitals have animal research programs, especially if they have an academic affiliation with an academic medical center. Not-for-profit institutions, zoos, even some animal rescue organizations. There is an animal rescue organization not too far from where I'm at in Texas that has constituted an ACAW. And there are laboratory animal breeders that have ACAWs. They may not be doing research, but they like the model that an ACAW provides in overseeing animal welfare. There's generally two paradigms with where veterinarians are within an organization when they're working with an ACAW. In some organizations, the veterinary animal care unit, whatever it may be called, the unit with the veterinarians, or they might be called the animal resources department, that might house the ACAW, or the ACAW might be in a separate administrative unit. Where I work, I have a separate administrative unit that oversees the ACAW. So I'm separate from the animal resources department, even though we report up into the same person, in my instance, the dean of research. But I work closely with those other veterinarians in the animal resources department. So positions and job functions that veterinarians usually have within ACAWs include protocol review, post-approval monitoring, policy development, training program development, as well as personnel management. Animal welfare is a very important component of working in an ACAW. However, you have to realize that the ACAW, for the most part, is inherently a regulatory body, since it is required in the United States by federal regulations and other government agency guidelines. Therefore, it's important to recognize the regulatory compliance does not equal animal welfare. Back in the day, 10 some odd years ago, I would see a lot of people use these terms interchangeably. I have noticed over the past several years that people are starting to understand the difference between these two terms. There are regulations, and I'm talking United States federal regulations here, that are called animal welfare regulations, because we do have the Animal Welfare Act, a federal law. But in reality, for the most part, what those regulations are doing are setting minimum standards, physical standards, for the most part. Again, there's some exceptions for non-human primates, physical standards and veterinary care standards that have to be met. Animal welfare, in terms of animal research oversight, usually goes well above and beyond those minimum standards. And animal welfare, for the most part, is going to meet your regulatory compliance requirements. And they might be based on the regulatory compliance, but that's not the end-all be-all for animal welfare. So IACUCs in ensuring animal welfare, so going above and beyond the regulatory requirements for research animal oversight, they're ensuring that protocol review and policies support animal welfare, again, beyond regulatory compliance. An example of this would be, there is a requirement in some of the regulations that IACUC protocols that involve pain and distress to the animals have to have a consultation, I think is the word, with a veterinarian. However, many IACUCs, to ensure animal welfare, will require a pre-review of that protocol by a veterinarian, even with the fact that it may not even cause substantial pain and distress. Ensure that procedures are conducted as per the protocol. So the regulations and guidelines insist that IACUCs must ensure compliance, that things are done as per the protocol. However, the regulations stop short of requiring what's called post-approval monitoring, which is observing how the researchers are conducting the procedure to ensure everything's being done well and that animal welfare components are being addressed. So having a post-approval monitoring program is another way of assuring animal welfare, again, going above and beyond regulatory compliance. IACUCs often train people, researchers, and animal caretakers in some of the fundamental concepts of animal welfare. IACUCs will participate in discussions about ensuring animal welfare at a programmatic level. So what I mean by this is looking at veterinary care, animal husbandry, protocol review, policies, and training together as a cumulative whole to ensure that all of these efforts are working together to support animal welfare. And very important for a vast majority of institutions doing vertebrate animal research is participation in ALAC International Accreditation site visits. ALAC is the not-for-profit accreditation body for laboratory animal facilities. And after the initial visit, lab animal facilities would get visited every 3 years by site visitors. And then also too, I think it's very important for IACUCs to publish. I personally do not believe that there's enough written about the research animal oversight process, and there's a lot more that could be explored in that. To that end, that's kind of my current area of publications. I had one earlier this year. The one, it's the second manuscript listed here about institutional animal care and use committees, post-approval monitoring programs. And, you know, I focused about how you can classify or categorize PAM programs in such a way to help with the assurance of animal welfare and to increase researcher understanding of the PAM process. I believe there's a lot of career growth in this area. There's the other certification in addition to ACAW certification. There are certainly management and leadership opportunities. And there are opportunities in other areas of research administration or compliance. Institutional Biosafety Committee, the Institutional Review Board, which is the analogous committee to the IACUC that oversees human research, conflict of interest, export control, and stem cell research. So with that, I am done. We still have a few more minutes for questions. You can find us on LinkedIn. We have a new group on LinkedIn. And that group is not limited to ACAW Diplomates. It's for anyone interested in ACAW or interested in supporting animal welfare as a specialty for veterinarians. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'll come on video and we'll see what questions we can answer in the remaining few minutes. Okay, so we've got some more chat questions. Okay. So Lavon's been answering several questions on the training program and listing out experiences and things you want to do to meet the task and knowledge requirements. So somebody asked about the UPenn and University of Edinburgh programs. So I know a little bit more about the UPenn program. Okay, so I have to start. ACAW has not officially endorsed any external training program like that. So with that, the people who do run and created and manage the UPenn program are ACAW Diplomates. Taking the courses, as Lavon mentioned, could satisfy some areas of the role delineation document, some of those task and knowledge or TK areas. You would want to make sure, though, that that's one component of your overall training program. That would not be sufficient for your training program as it is. I do know somebody who's completed the University of Edinburgh program. That's an entire master's program. But they're not an ACAW diplomate, so I actually don't know much more about that one. Then somebody said, real short course.
Stacey, can you hear me?
Yes,
Stacey,
I can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention too that, like you said, there's only one approved program and it's not funded right now. So if you do take courses in these programs, you need to provide details exactly what references were read, and focus in on it. We've had some people just put down, took this course, and that's not acceptable. They need to go back and, when you do it, put it in there, because it has to align with what the TK, the knowledge area says. We've had some people put something in that's totally out of context, and we can't accept that. So be careful about that as well. Sorry.
Yeah, the other thing too is sometimes people will literally just put down a URL, a website address, as far as how they're going to gain the knowledge, and that is also insufficient as well. There's asking about advice for finding a suitable mentor. So I gave you the information about the website, finding a mentor that way. You definitely want to email and reach out to them. This year has really thrown a curveball, for everybody, and ACAW, of course, is no exception. Some of you may remember years ago, ACAW held a very successful multi-day conference. It's called the Animal Welfare Short Course at North Carolina State. That ended in 2017, and then we started partnering with the AVMA at the AVMA convention to provide a day and a half of programming from ACAW. And each year we would give a session about becoming board certified, and a lot of diplomates attended. 20, 30 diplomates would attend these sessions. And also last year at the AVMA convention, we actually hosted a networking event where we had over 70 some odd people. Chelsea just mentioned that. And those were great ways to find mentors. Unfortunately, that didn't happen this year. So we did do this webinar. We're hoping to start up with some robust CE offerings next year. We've got quite a few ideas. But I would reach out to people on through the website. I do know that there are several ACAW diplomates who like to have mentors kind of in their close geographical area. And I have done some matchmaking, if you will, with ACAW diplomates. So, you can reach out to me through the ACAW website. If you send any inquiry through the ACAW website, it goes through me and I can see what I can do. I didn't know if any of Chelsea, Randy, or Lavon, if you had any other comments on finding a mentor.
Well, I would, go to the website and look at our mentoring guideline document. There's some information there. When we put this together, we wrote this several years ago, but we tried to I mean, a lot of people have somebody in their discipline. I know there's some people that don't, or in their area, but you want to have a good match. My understanding is, and somebody who's committed to you. And it doesn't always mean that you have to be close by. It just need, with virtual, opportunities, you can meet and still have a good experience. But it all also, it depends upon your personality and your needs. You've got to kind of customize it to your needs. So, and be engaged in it.
So
Yeah, I'll just
Kathleen-
add from my own experience. I worked with Dr. Patty Olson, who was local in Fort Collins, and she has more of a companion animal background, and so she was a great resource. Anytime I had logistical questions about going through the process of ACAW, like she answered all of those for me, and then she also helped me network with others who could provide that expertise in different species areas for me. And so since I was in a PhD program, Dr. Frank Gehry, who is a large animal medicine professor at CSU, he was on my PhD committee. And so he, while not board certified in ACAW, he was able to supplement some of that, food animal experience and help me reach out to others. So I don't think you necessarily have to have the same professional interest or area to work, but I think it really is about that personality. And for me, having someone locally was really beneficial to me. And then I saw another question about the journal clubs, and I'll just say that I participated in 2 unofficial ACAW journal clubs, and I found that to be incredibly valuable. Not only did it help me, be exposed to a wide variety of topics through the articles that we read, but just being able to hear from people with very different perspectives. I have more of a food animal background, but working with people that have, different areas of expertise and ways of looking at things, I think some of the discussion that came out of that really enlightened me. So I would encourage that if you are interested.
So building upon what Chelsea just said, we do not have an official journal club, but there are a couple unofficial ones. Hillary posted that information. We do have an official Google Groups listserv for people who have registered and who are currently within a training route. So we will send information about animal welfare programs, like there's a donkey welfare program going to be going on at UC Davis here pretty shortly. UFAW hosted an excellent rodent welfare program the other week. And so we just send information out to people in training programs through that official listserv. And then we are also distributing information through the LinkedIn group as well.
There's a question about having a well-completed spreadsheet. I'm reluctant to, this isn't mine. I think there are some candidates that have become diplomates that have a pretty good spreadsheet, and remember, this is customized because everybody comes from a different background and has different opportunities. I guess, don't know if we could, request it if anybody's, would be willing to send theirs to somebody, but I don't think I could, recommend anybody without them it being theirs, that they need to say volunteer to send it out.
I know that some mentors, if they're not charter diplomates, have shared examples of their case activities log with mentees. So I know that has occurred.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah. It's 3:01. I didn't know where Dane was. So Hillary also said when she was interviewing potential mentors, a few just offered me there. So yeah, that happens a lot. So I didn't know, Dane, if you wanted us to stop. If there's any other questions, You can always submit something through the ACAW website. Like I said, I get those emails. I can either answer them or I forward them on to the appropriate ACAW diplomate. Usually it's a committee chair to answer those questions.
Stacy, it's your call. We're still recording.
Okay. Well, I guess I can do one last call for any questions through the chat. Okay, then, well, I'm not seeing anything. So at this time, I think we'll end it. I appreciate everybody who attended. I think this was great. This was our first time doing this, and I will count this as a success. Like I said, if you have any other questions, you can go ahead and reach out to us through the website. Join our LinkedIn group, and a lot of you wanted the PowerPoint slides. We'll try to get those to you, and the recording will be up on the ACAW website for as long as this material is current. So with that, everyone have a good day. Bye.